The 2026 World Cup was supposed to be the easiest global success story on the calendar. Biggest tournament ever. 48 teams, 104 matches, 3 host countries. The United States, Canada, and Mexico selling the world a picture of packed stadiums, smooth travel, booming cities, and a celebration powerful enough to remind everyone that North America can still host the planet. But now, just weeks before kickoff, the story is getting more complicated. Hotels are being released. Ticket prices are being attacked. Security money has been delayed. Visa rules are making some fans think twice. Iran's participation has turned into a diplomatic flashpoint. And the uncomfortable question is no longer, will the World Cup happen? Of course it will happen. The real question is this. Will it feel like the confident, open, record-breaking global festival that FIFA promised, or will it expose just how tense, expensive, and politically divided North America has become? Before we go deeper, if you want clear, no-nonsense coverage of the political, economic, and global stories shaping the United States, Canada, and the world, subscribe to the channel. Because this is not just a sports story, it is a test of American border policy, a test of Canadian public security, a test of Mexico's tourism machine, a test of FIFA's commercial strategy, and maybe most importantly, a test of whether a global event can still feel global when the politics around it are becoming more national, more suspicious, and more expensive by the day. The official picture is still strong. FIFA says more than 5 million tickets have already been sold, and it expects this tournament to surpass the old 1994 cumulative attendance record of 3.5 million. FIFA also opened another last-minute sales phase on April 22nd, with tickets being released across all 104 matches and more inventory expected to become available through the end of the tournament. That sounds impressive, and it is impressive. 5 million tickets is not failure. 5 million tickets is not an empty stadium crisis. 5 million tickets means millions of people are still preparing to travel, spend money, book hotels, flood airports, fill bars, and turn cities into football capitals. But here's where the story changes. A tournament can be commercially huge and still be politically messy. A tournament can sell millions of tickets and still have dangerous gaps in certain markets. A tournament can break records and still leave fans angry, hotels uncertain, host cities stressed, and government scrambling behind the scenes. And that is exactly what appears to be happening. Look at Philadelphia. FIFA released about 2,000 hotel rooms in the city from an original block of roughly 10,000 rooms. At first glance, that sounds alarming. It sounds like demand collapsed. It sounds like someone looked at the numbers and quietly panicked. But slow down. The rooms were not ordinary fan bookings. They were part of FIFA's operational block for technical staff, teams, referees, and tournament personnel. FIFA said this type of adjustment is normal as the event gets closer and operational needs become clearer. The Greater Philadelphia Hotel Association also said FIFA acted within its contract and that the rooms would go back into the market for fans and visitors. So, no, this is not proof that Philadelphia is suddenly empty. But it is still meaningful. Why? Because when an event is sold as the biggest, richest, most powerful World Cup in history, even normal adjustments start to look suspicious if they happen alongside high ticket prices, nervous travelers, and political uncertainty. That is how trust works. If everything else looks smooth, 2,000 released rooms are just logistics. If everything else looks unstable, 2,000 released rooms become a warning sign. And Philadelphia is not the only place facing questions. There have also been reports about room blocks being reduced in other host markets, including Mexico City. Some of the more dramatic claims online have suggested major cancellation waves. But the stronger reporting points to a more careful explanation. In some markets, hundreds of rooms were released from operational blocks, not necessarily mass fan cancellations. That difference matters. Because FIFA adjusts hotel inventory is one story. Fans are abandoning the World Cup is a very different story. And right now, the evidence supports the first more clearly than the second. But the reason this is getting attention is because it connects to something much bigger, price pressure. For ordinary fans, this World Cup is not just a tournament. It is a financial decision. flights, hotels, visas, food, local transport, match tickets, resale prices, family expenses, currency exchange, time off work. That is not a weekend plan. That is a budget conversation. And in the United States especially, the ticket market has become one of the most controversial parts of the entire tournament. FIFA President Gianni Infantino has defended the pricing model, arguing that FIFA depends on World Cup revenue to fund football globally, but the numbers fans are seeing have created real backlash. In one Reuters reported check cited by Al Jazeera, the cheapest StubHub listing for the United States opener against Paraguay was $1,359, while some lower bowl tickets were listed as high as $14,000. For the final in the New York area, listings ranged from $8,860 in the upper deck to as much as $25,000 in the lower bowl. Wait a second, a family of 4 wants to watch one match, not the final. Not a luxury hospitality suite, just one major game. And suddenly the conversation is not about football anymore. It is about rent. It is about a car payment. It is about whether this global event has become something that ordinary supporters are invited to watch on television while wealthier fans experience it in person. That is the real tension. FIFA can say the tournament is selling, and FIFA would be right. But fans can also say the prices are pushing people out, and they would not be wrong either. Both things can be true at the same time. Now look at the U.S. men's national team opener. The United States plays Paraguay at SoFi Stadium on June 12th. According to a document reported by The Athletic and summarized by Goal, around 40,934 tickets had been sold as of April 10th for that match. That number does not include every possible ticket category, and FIFA has disputed the accuracy of the document, saying it does not reflect actual sales to date. So we have to be careful here. This is not a confirmed final attendance number. This is not proof of an empty stadium. But it is still enough to raise questions about demand, especially when SoFi's capacity is much higher and thousands of tickets were reportedly still available across sales cycles. And here is the strange part. This is the host nation. This is the country that FIFA and U.S. soccer officials want to turn into a deeper football market. This is the moment when American soccer is supposed to explode into the mainstream. So if the opener is not moving at the pace people expected, that is not a small detail. That is a signal. Maybe the prices are too high. Maybe the opponent does not create enough emotion for casual fans. Maybe the American sports calendar is too crowded. Maybe Los Angeles is expensive enough already before you add World Cup pricing. Maybe the U.S. audience loves big events, but not every fan is willing to pay premium prices just because FIFA says the moment is historic. That is the commercial risk. The 2026 World Cup is not happening in a country where football is the only religion. It is happening in a marketplace where consumers compare everything. World Cup ticket or NBA playoff ticket. World Cup trip or family vacation, one match or 1 month of groceries. That is the calculation people are making, and that calculation becomes even harder when travel itself gets complicated. This is where the politics enters the stadium. FIFA has told fans clearly that a match ticket does not guarantee admission to a host country, and that travelers must check entry requirements for Canada, Mexico, and the United States. FIFA also recommends that fans submit visa applications as early as possible and says World Cup ticket holders traveling to the U.S. can use a priority appointment scheduling system. On paper, that sounds like normal advice. In practice, it is a major issue because this tournament is not being held in one country with one border system. It is being held across 3 countries with 3 sets of immigration rules, 3 political climates, and 3 different levels of anxiety around security, migration, and public order. For fans from wealthy visa waiver countries, that may not feel like much. Book a flight, fill out a form, show up. But for fans from countries facing tougher U.S. visa conditions, this is not simple at all. The U.S. State Department lists several countries whose nationals are subject to visa bond requirements. That list includes Algeria, Cabo Verde, Cote d'Ivoire, Senegal, and Tunisia, among many others. Under the policy, eligible B1/B2 visa applicants from listed countries may be required to post a bond of $5,000, $10,000, or $15,000, with the final amount determined at the visa interview. A bond does not guarantee visa approval. Now think about that from the fans' point of view. Your country qualifies for the World Cup. This is supposed to be a once-in-a-generation trip. You save for flights, you try to buy tickets, you check hotels, and then the U.S. visa process may require a bond that can reach $15,000. Refundable, yes, under the rules if conditions are met, but still cash that many families simply do not have available. That is not a minor travel inconvenience. That is a wall made of paperwork and money. And the countries affected are not random in the World Cup context. Several are football nations with passionate supporters. Algeria, Senegal, Côte d'Ivoire, Tunisia, Cabo Verde. These are not countries where fans watch quietly and shrug. These are countries where football carries identity, pride, migration, diaspora, memory, and national emotion. So when travel rules make attendance harder, the impact is not only economic, it is cultural. It changes who gets to be physically present. It changes the sound inside the stadium. It changes the color in the streets. It changes the very thing a World Cup is supposed to represent. And that raises a bigger question for American viewers and Canadian viewers alike. Can a tournament still call itself fully global if some of the world's most passionate fans are priced or processed out before they even reach the airport? Now, supporters of tighter visa rules will give a very different answer. They will say border control does not disappear because FIFA arrives. They will say the U.S. government has a responsibility to screen visitors, prevent overstays, manage security risks, and enforce immigration law. And that is a real argument. No country gives up its sovereignty for a sports event. Not the United States, not Canada, not Mexico, but the challenge is balance. Because when security becomes too heavy, a celebration can start to feel like a checkpoint. When prices become too high, a people's game can start to feel like a luxury product. And when politics becomes too visible, the match itself can feel smaller than the world around it. That is exactly what is happening with Iran. Iran's participation has become the most sensitive geopolitical issue surrounding the tournament. After U.S. and Israeli strikes killed Iran's supreme leader and triggered a wider regional conflict, Iranian officials said the country could not participate under those conditions. Later, the U.S. position shifted towards saying Iranian athletes are not barred from competing, but people with ties to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps would not be allowed entry. Reuters reported that Secretary of State Marco Rubio said Washington did not object to Iranian players participating, while maintaining that IRGC-linked individuals would be blocked. That is not a normal sports dispute. That is not a scheduling complaint. That is a war, a security designation, a diplomatic standoff, and a global tournament all colliding at once. Iran reportedly requested that its U.S.-based matches be moved to Mexico, but FIFA rejected the relocation request, with Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum saying the fixtures would not be moved from the United States. And again, listen to what this means. The athletes may be allowed, some officials may not be. Fans may face barriers. Security agencies may be watching. Host cities may be preparing for protests. FIFA may want the schedule protected. Governments may want their red lines respected. And everybody is pretending this is just about football. No, this is where the World Cup becomes a stage for the world as it actually exists, not the clean marketing version, the real one. A world of sanctions, wars, travel bans, intelligence concerns, political messaging, and national pride. And for Canada, this is not distant. Canada is not just watching from the side. Canada is a co-host. Toronto and Vancouver will stage 13 matches, and the Canadian government has now allocated up to $145 million for World Cup security, with about $45 million set for Toronto and $100 million for Vancouver. Reuters reported that this comes on top of $220 million already allocated to Canadian host cities, within a broader federal hosting commitment of up to $320 million. That tells you something important. Canada wants the tournament to succeed. But Canada also understands the scale of the risk. Large crowds, international visitors, high-profile teams, public fan zones, diplomatic sensitivities, possible protests, extreme weather, transportation pressure, and the constant modern threat that any global event can become a target for disruption, whether from violence, cyber attacks, political demonstrations, or simple operational failure. Canada's problem is different from the US problem. In the United States, the biggest concerns are tied to immigration politics, federal security funding delays, pricing backlash, and polarized national debate. In Canada, the concern is whether cities can manage the cost, the crowd, and the public safety burden while still making the event feel welcoming. That is a delicate line, because taxpayers will ask fair questions. How much does this cost? Who benefits? Are local businesses getting real gains? Are ordinary Canadians getting access, or are they just paying for infrastructure, policing, and disruption? And for Canadian officials, the answer has to be more than global exposure. People have heard that line before. The tournament has to feel like a benefit, not just a bill. That is why fan zones matter. That is why public access matters. That is why transportation and security matter, because most people will not be inside the stadium. Most people will experience the World Cup in public spaces, on screens, in streets, in bars, in parks, and on transit routes. If those spaces feel safe, organized, and open, the tournament can lift the city. If they feel expensive, chaotic, and over-policed, the public mood can turn very quickly. Mexico seems to understand that part clearly. Mexico City has announced 18 free fan festivals during the World Cup, with public screenings, cultural events, food fairs, family activities, and a main FIFA fan fest in the Zocalo. Reuters reported that 7 sites will broadcast all matches, while the others will focus on key games, including Mexico's matches. That is smart politics, because while FIFA sells tickets, cities sell atmosphere. A World Cup is not only judged by the people inside stadiums, it is judged by the millions outside them. The fan who cannot afford a ticket but can still watch with thousands of people in a public square. The family that cannot travel across the country but can still feel part of the moment. The visitor who remembers not just the match but the street food, the music, the language, the crowd, the feeling that the city opened itself. That is how a host city wins. And it is also where the North American model faces its biggest challenge, because the 2026 World Cup is spread across a massive geography. This is not Qatar, where fans could stay in one area and move between venues with relative ease. This is a tournament across an entire continent. Los Angeles, New York/New Jersey, Miami, Dallas, Houston, Seattle, Toronto, Vancouver, Mexico City, Monterrey, Guadalajara, and more. That means flights, long drives, different climates, different border rules, different prices, different security systems, different local politics. The scale is historic. But scale can be a strength or a weakness. If everything works, this becomes the most commercially powerful World Cup ever staged. If things break down, the size becomes the problem. And this is where security funding becomes critical. Reuters reported in March that delayed U.S. security funding of $625 million had caused preparation setbacks, with FIFA and U.S. briefings warning about extremist threats, possible unrest tied to immigration policies, and the security challenges of fan festivals. That is not background noise. That is serious. Host cities need time. Police departments need plans. Emergency services need coordination. Transportation agencies need staffing. Fan festivals need crowd control systems. Public health teams need heat plans. And if federal money arrives late, local governments cannot simply invent time. They can improvise. They can stretch budgets. They can ask departments to absorb costs. But large events punish late planning. And the World Cup is not a normal large event. It is multiple Super Bowls, multiple political summits, multiple concerts, and multiple diplomatic moments happening at once. Now add another layer. FIFA reportedly cut more than $100 million from its operating budget for this summer's tournament in North America, according to a Reuters report citing The Athletic. Is that automatically a scandal? Not necessarily. Big organizations cut budgets all the time. They call it efficiency. They call it discipline. They call it right sizing. But when budget cuts happen alongside delayed security money, hotel adjustments, and fan anxiety, people begin asking whether the system is being tightened at exactly the wrong moment. And this is the part many casual viewers may miss. The World Cup is not one organization doing one job. It is FIFA, host cities, federal governments, local police, transportation agencies, stadium operators, immigration authorities, tourism boards, hotels, airlines, broadcasters, sponsors, national teams, and private security contractors all trying to move in the same direction. If one piece slips, the entire experience can feel worse, not because the tournament collapses, but because friction accumulates. A visa delay here, a hotel cancellation there, a ticket price shock, a long security line, a heat alert, a protest outside a fan zone, a delayed train, a family priced out. One problem may be manageable, 10 problems at once become the story, and there is another issue no one can ignore: heat. The tournament will take place in June and July across 16 cities in the US, Canada, and Mexico. AP reported that host cities, stadiums, and FIFA are preparing for extreme heat risks with heat assessments, more shade, cooling zones, water access, medical teams, and other measures. FIFA says players will get 3-minute hydration breaks midway through each half regardless of weather, and it has created a heat illness mitigation and management task force. This matters for players, but it also matters for fans, because the people most at risk may not be the athletes with medical teams and climate-controlled benches. It may be the families standing in line for transit, the older fan walking between a hotel and a fan zone, the worker outside the stadium, the volunteer on a long shift, the tourist who underestimates a North American heat wave, the teenager waiting for hours in direct sun because everyone arrived at the same time. That is not dramatic. That is practical. And practical failures are what viewers remember. Nobody remembers the press release. Everybody remembers the line that did not move. Everybody remembers the water bottle that cost too much. Everybody remembers the train that did not show up. Everybody remembers the feeling that organizers were not ready. So when critics say the World Cup is in crisis, that may be too strong. But when officials say everything is fine, that may also be too simple. The truth is more uncomfortable. The World Cup is not collapsing. It is being stress tested. Commercially, it is powerful. Politically, it is exposed. Operationally, it is under pressure. And reputationally, it has less room for mistakes than FIFA would like to admit. For American viewers, this tournament is about more than whether the US team wins a match. It is about whether the United States can host the world while arguing with itself about who gets to enter the country, what security should look like, how much public money should be spent, and whether global events should serve ordinary people or premium buyers. It is also about soft power. The US flaunts the world to see modern stadiums, packed crowds, corporate strength, and national confidence. But if the world instead sees visa friction, political tension, unaffordable prices, and visible empty sections in certain matches, that sends a different message. Not that America is weak. That would be too simplistic. But that America is complicated, expensive, divided, hard to enter, hard to navigate, still powerful, but not always welcoming. For Canadian viewers, the tournament carries a different meaning. Canada wants to show itself as stable, open, diverse, and capable of hosting global sport without the political chaos often attached to its southern neighbor. But Canada is also paying serious money, handling security risk, managing public expectations, and trying to make sure Toronto and Vancouver do not become case studies in cost overruns and public frustration. If Canada gets it right, it strengthens its image. If it gets it wrong, critics will ask why taxpayers were asked to carry the burden while FIFA and sponsors collected the spotlight. For Mexico, the opportunity is emotional and historic. Mexico City is not just another host. The Azteca will open the tournament. Mexico is football culture in a way the United States is still trying to become. And free fan festivals across the capital show that Mexican officials understand something essential. The World Cup is not only about selling access, it is about creating belonging. That may end up being one of the biggest contrasts of the tournament. In some places, fans may feel like customers. In others, they may feel like participants. And that difference matters. So what happens next? First, FIFA will keep releasing tickets. That may reduce visible gaps in some matches, especially if prices soften or if last-minute demand rises. Second, host cities will continue pushing security and public safety plans, especially with federal funding and local budgets under scrutiny. Third, visa and travel issues will become more urgent as fans finalize plans. A policy that looked abstract in January becomes very real when someone has to decide whether to risk thousands of dollars on a trip. Fourth, Iran remains a major uncertainty. The U.S. says Iranian athletes are not barred. FIFA wants the schedule protected. Iranian officials have sent mixed and politically charged signals, and any new escalation in the region could change the atmosphere quickly. Fifth, the public narrative will depend heavily on images. If stadiums look full, critics will lose some ground. If the first fan zones are packed and joyful, cities will breathe easier. If security lines move smoothly, the planning will be praised. But if television cameras catch empty seats at high-profile matches, if fans complain about prices, if border problems dominate social media, or if protests overwhelm the happy imagery, the biggest World Cup ever narrative could turn into something much more uncomfortable. Do you think this is smart event planning under difficult conditions, or are FIFA and host governments asking fans to carry too much cost and uncertainty? Because that is the debate underneath all of this. Not whether people love football. They do. Not whether the World Cup matters. It does. The debate is whether the modern World Cup has become too big, too expensive, too political, and too dependent on governments cleaning up the risks while fans pay the premium. And here's the most important point. A record-breaking World Cup does not automatically mean a healthy World Cup. You can sell millions of tickets and still leave ordinary fans feeling squeezed. You can fill stadiums and still damage trust. You can generate billions and still create a tournament that feels less accessible than the sport deserves. That is the contradiction FIFA is facing. Football sells itself. The World Cup sells itself. The flags, the songs, the drama, the upsets, the penalties, the tears, the moments that become memory forever. That part will still happen. But around the edges of the pitch, the politics are getting louder. Borders are getting tighter. Prices are getting higher. Cities are getting more nervous. Security is getting more expensive. Climate risks are getting harder to ignore. And the global promise of the tournament is running directly into the national realities of the countries hosting it. So no, the 2026 World Cup is not doomed. That would be lazy. It is too big, too valuable, and too far along to simply fall apart. But it is also not the clean celebration that the promotional videos want you to imagine. It is a giant event moving through a tense political moment. And sometimes the biggest events do not hide a country's problems. They magnify them. That may be the real story of this World Cup. Not that North America cannot host the world, it can. Not that fans will not come, millions will. But when the world arrives, it will not only see the stadium lights, it will see the prices, it will see the borders, it will see the security presence, it will see the politics, it will see who gets in, who stays out, who can afford the moment, and who is left watching from far away. And that is why the next few weeks matter. Because before the first whistle blows, before the first anthem plays, before the first goal turns into a global clip, the 2026 World Cup is already telling us something. The world's game is still powerful enough to bring nations together, but the world around the game is becoming harder to manage. And that tension may define this tournament long before the trophy is lifted.